That morning, no one aboard the USS Leviathan knew they were drifting into history. Captain Alexandra Lex Morgan stood in the control room, reviewing her checklist as the submarine cleared South Korean waters. And for a moment, everything seemed routine. But in a bunker beneath Pyongyang, Colonel Kim Hyok-jin was counting down. His team of cyber warriors had prepared for months. At 9:47, every computer screen on the Leviathan went black. Navigation gone. Sonar dead. Ballast systems offline. A $2.8 billion nuclear submarine reduced to a silent hulk. Panic rippled through the crew. Officers shouted across darkened consoles. Sailors pounded lifeless keyboards. "Captain, I've lost everything." The navigation officer trembled. "We're blind, ma'am." Dead in the water. And then came the radio chatter. North Korean fleets moving in, announcing to the world that an American submarine had entered their waters, begging for rescue. But it was a lie, designed to turn a drift into a capture. In that instant, 134 lives, and perhaps the peace of nations, rested on one woman's decision. What happened next would prove that sometimes the only way to survive modern warfare is to remember the oldest skills of the sea. The USS Leviathan cut through the Yellow Sea's choppy waters, returning from what should have been a routine port visit to Busan, South Korea. Captain Alexandra Lex Morgan stood on the bridge, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she reviewed the departure checklist. 3 days of joint exercises with the Republic of Korea Navy had gone flawlessly. "Captain, we're clearing Korean territorial waters," reported Lieutenant Jennifer Crenshaw, the 29-year-old navigation officer whose eyes never left her GPS display. Bearing 270, maintaining depth at 60 feet. Lex nodded, but something felt wrong. Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniel Westbrook, the boat's 39-year-old chief of the boat, caught her eye. His weathered face showed the same unease. Sonar contact bearing 095 called sonar technician First Class Ryan Curtis from his station. "Looks like a Korean patrol boat, maintaining distance." But what nobody knew was that 200 miles away, Colonel Kim Hyok-jin was already counting down. In a windowless bunker beneath Pyongyang, the 41-year-old North Korean cyber warfare commander watched multiple screens displaying the USS Leviathan's exact position. His team of hackers had spent months preparing for this moment. "American submarine is in optimal position," he announced in Korean. "Begin Operation Digital Storm." Now here's where everything changed. At 09:47 hours, every screen aboard the USS Leviathan went black simultaneously. "What the hell?" Curtis shouted as his sonar displays died. "I've got nothing." No contacts, no depth readings, nothing. Lieutenant Crenshaw's hands flew across her navigation console. "GPS is down. Navigation computer is completely dead. Captain, I can't plot our position." Commander Thomas Ashford, the 44-year-old executive officer, rushed to the main computer terminal. "All systems are offline, Captain. Navigation, communications, ballast control computers, everything's been wiped." Lex felt her blood turn cold. Without computer-controlled ballast systems, the submarine was essentially a 7,800-ton piece of drifting metal. "Engineering report," she called into the comm system. Silence. Even internal communications were down. But the real shock was yet to come. Petty Officer Second Class Amanda Maxwell, the 24-year-old communications specialist with North Korean linguistics training, pressed her headphones closer to her ears. "Captain, I'm picking up radio chatter on emergency frequencies. It's North Korean Naval Command." "What are they saying?" Lex demanded. Maxwell's face went pale. "They're mobilizing rescue vessels, ma'am. They're claiming we've sent a distress signal and entered their territorial waters." "That's impossible," Ashford protested. "We're still in international waters." Lex grabbed the manual compass from the emergency kit, her mind racing. Without GPS, they had no way to verify their position. Without ballast computers, the submarine was slowly drifting with the current, and that current was pushing them north, directly toward North Korean waters. "Wait until you see what happened next." "Captain," Westbrook said quietly, approaching with a paper chart, something most of the crew had never used. "If we're drifting at current speed, we'll be in North Korean territorial waters within 4 hours." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. A disabled American nuclear submarine in North Korean waters would give Kim Jong-un the perfect excuse for a rescue operation, which would really be a capture. "Captain, with all due respect," Ashford said, his voice strained. "We need to surface and call for help immediately." "Surface?" Lex shook her head. "The moment we surface, we're completely vulnerable. And without communications, we can't call anyone." Lieutenant Crenshaw was visibly shaking. "Ma'am, I don't know how to navigate without GPS. I've never done manual plotting. None of us have." You won't believe what Lex did next. Lex Morgan had spent years training in Arctic waters where electronic navigation could fail without warning. She'd learned the old ways: dead reckoning, celestial navigation, manual ballast control, skills the modern Navy had largely forgotten. "Senior Chief, break out every manual we have on pre-computer navigation," she ordered. "Lieutenant Crenshaw, forget your screens exist. We're going analog." "Analog?" Curtis laughed nervously. "Captain, this isn't World War II." "No, it's not," Lex replied grimly. "In World War II, submarine crews knew how to operate without computers. Right now, we're more helpless than they ever were." She spread the paper chart across the navigation table, her finger tracing their last known position. "Westbrook, I need you to teach manual ballast operation to the diving crew. We're going to control our depth the way submarines did for 50 years. But just when they thought they had a plan, Maxwell suddenly straightened in her chair. "Captain, North Korean submarine contact on passive sonar. Acoustic signature suggests a Romeo-class boat, bearing north-northeast, closing slowly. Without computer-assisted sonar, they were navigating blind while being stalked by an enemy submarine. They're hurting us," Lex realized. The cyber attack wasn't just to disable us. It was to push us into their waters while we can't defend ourselves. Ashford's face was grim. "Captain, even if we regain manual control, how do we navigate out of here without knowing exactly where we are?" Lex studied the compass, then looked at the ancient sextant in the emergency navigation kit, the same way mariners did for centuries. "We use the sun. Here's what nobody expected. Curtis, I need you to listen for acoustic signals, not through your computers, but with your own ears. Shipping traffic, underwater geological activity, anything that can give us position references." "Captain," Curtis protested, "I can't identify contacts without sonar processing." "Yes, you can," Lex insisted. "Your ears are better than any computer. Trust them." She turned to Crenshaw. "Lieutenant, I'm going to teach you dead reckoning navigation. It's going to be the longest 4 hours of your life, but it's the only way we survive." "Ma'am, what if I make a mistake? What if I navigate us directly into North Korean waters? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, staying here means certain capture. The next part will shock you." Working by hand, Lex began calculating their position using the compass bearing, estimated drift speed, and the position of the sun. It was painstaking work that required absolute concentration. "Westbrook, report on manual ballast control," she called. "We've got basic depth control back, Captain, but it's like steering a whale with a paperclip. Response time is about 10 minutes for major depth changes." Lex nodded. In a crisis, 10 minutes might as well be 10 hours, but it was better than nothing. "Maxwell, what's the North Korean radio traffic saying now?" "They're coordinating with surface vessels, ma'am. Multiple patrol boats are converging on our estimated position." "But wait, there's more." "Curtis, acoustic report." The young sonar technician closed his eyes, pressing his headphones tight against his ears. "Captain, I can hear. There's a merchant vessel bearing approximately west-southwest. Engine signature sounds like a large container ship. Distance? I can't tell without computer analysis." "Then we make an educated guess," Lex said firmly. "In these shipping lanes, what would be the most likely distance?" Curtis considered this. "Probably 8 to 12 miles. "Good enough. That gives us a bearing reference." Lex marked the position on her chart. "One more bearing, and we can triangulate our position." Lieutenant Crenshaw was studying the paper chart like it held the secrets of the universe. "Captain, even if we know where we are, how do we plot a course out of here without GPS?" "The same way Columbus found America," Lex replied. "Compass, speed calculations, and prayer." The moment that changed everything. 3 hours into their manual navigation nightmare, Maxwell's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, I'm monitoring North Korean fleet communications. They've declared a maritime emergency zone and are ordering all vessels to clear the area for their rescue operation." "How long do we have?" Lex asked. "Based on their radio traffic, their nearest patrol boat is approximately 40 minutes from our position." Lex looked at the chart where she'd been painstakingly plotting their course. By her calculations, they were still 12 miles from the nearest point of North Korean territorial waters, but drifting closer every minute. "Westbrook, can we increase speed?" "Not without computer-controlled propulsion, ma'am. We're limited to about 6 knots maximum." "Just when you think you know what happens." Commander Ashford approached quietly. "Captain, the crew is getting nervous. Half of them think we should surface and surrender to the North Koreans. At least we'd be alive. And the other half, they're willing to follow your lead, but they don't understand how manual navigation can get us out of this." Lex looked around the control room at the faces of her crew. Young sailors who had grown up with GPS and computer navigation, now forced to trust ancient techniques they'd never learned. "Listen up, everyone," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the control room. "I know this seems impossible. You've been trained to rely on computers, and now those computers are gone. But submarines operated for decades before GPS existed, before sonar computers, before digital anything." Curtis looked up from his manual acoustic listening. "But those crews trained for years on analog systems, and we're going to learn in 4 hours what they learned in 4 years," Lex replied, "because that's what it takes to get home. Don't miss this crucial moment." "Captain," Maxwell's voice was urgent. "North Korean Command is broadcasting a message on international frequencies. They're claiming we've entered their territorial waters and are offering immediate assistance." Lex checked her manual position plot. According to her calculations, they were still in international waters, but barely. "How accurate are your position calculations, ma'am?" Ashford asked quietly. "Honestly? Plus or minus 2 miles, Lex admitted. "With manual navigation, that's about as precise as we can get." The control room fell silent. 2 miles could mean the difference between international waters and becoming prisoners of war. "Ma'am," Crenshaw said hesitantly, "what if we're wrong? What if we're already in their territory?" "Then we keep going anyway," Lex said firmly, "because surrender isn't an option." The turning point nobody saw coming. Curtis suddenly straightened at his listening post. "Captain, I'm hearing something new. Multiple surface contacts, high-speed approaches, bearing north-northeast. North Korean patrol boats." "I think so, ma'am. Engine signatures suggest fast attack craft, multiple contacts." Maxwell confirmed the worst. "North Korean Fleet Command is ordering final approach for rescue operation. ETA 20 minutes. Lex studied her chart one more time, double-checking every calculation. They had one chance to escape before being surrounded by North Korean vessels. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's internal address system, which was one of the few systems still functioning. "We're about to attempt something that hasn't been done in 50 years. Full manual navigation out of hostile waters. I need every person on this boat to trust the process and follow orders exactly." Here's what happened in those final moments. Westbrook, manual ballast to achieve depth of 80 feet. Crenshaw, plot course 245 degrees south-southwest. Curtis, maintain acoustic watch for surface contacts. Maxwell, monitor all North Korean communications. As the ancient procedures slowly took effect, Lex felt the submarine respond to manual controls for the first time in her career. It was like flying by instinct rather than instruments. Captain Curtis reported, "I can hear the North Korean patrol boats clearly now. Multiple contacts, getting closer. Time to international waters?" Lex asked. Crenshaw looked up from her manual calculations. "Based on our estimated position and speed, approximately 90 minutes, ma'am. And time until North Korean patrol boats reach our last known position." Maxwell checked her radio intercepts. 15 minutes, Captain." The impossible decision that saved everyone. Lex realized they had only one option. Go deeper than the North Korean boats could track them and maintain absolute silence while navigating manually through one of the most dangerous waters in the world. Take us down to 200 feet, manual control only. Silent running protocols in effect. No unnecessary noise. No mechanical sounds, nothing that could give away our position. As the USS Leviathan slowly descended using manual ballast control, every person aboard understood that their lives depended on 1940s technology and their captain's ability to navigate by instinct. Curtis acoustic report every 5 minutes. Maxwell monitored their search patterns. If they find us. Lex didn't need to finish the sentence. 2 hours later, when everyone thought they were safe. Captain, I have good news and bad news. Maxwell reported. Bad news first. The North Koreans are claiming we've violated their territorial waters and are demanding an official explanation from Washington. And the good news. Maxwell smiled for the first time in hours. Based on our manual navigation, we're now 30 miles into international waters. We made it, ma'am. Lex allowed herself a small smile, but her expression remained serious. This isn't over yet. We still need to figure out who compromised our systems and make sure this never happens again. But the biggest surprise was still coming. As the USS Leviathan finally restored partial computer systems 6 hours later, Admiral Charles Northcott's voice crackled through the communication system from Pacific Fleet Command. Captain Morgan, we've been monitoring North Korean propaganda broadcasts. They're claiming they rescued a disabled American submarine. Sir, we were never in distress and never in their waters, Lex replied. We know, Captain, but this incident has revealed a critical vulnerability in our submarine fleet. Your manual navigation just proved that our most advanced weapon systems can be completely disabled by cyber warfare. Lex understood the implications immediately. Sir, are you saying this was a test? Negative, Captain. This was a real attack by North Korean hackers, but your response has shown us something we never wanted to admit. We've become too dependent on technology. The revelation that changed everything. Captain Morgan, Admiral Northcott continued, effective immediately, you're being assigned to develop manual navigation training protocols for the entire submarine fleet. What you accomplished today, navigating manually through hostile waters while under cyber attack, that's going to become standard training for every submarine commander in the Navy. Lex looked around the control room at her crew, who were all listening intently. Every submarine officer will learn the skills you used today, the Admiral concluded, because if this can happen once, it can happen again. And next time, we'll be ready. As the USS Leviathan continued its journey home, Captain Lex Morgan realized that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones, and that in an age of digital warfare, the human element still matters most. The story that nobody expected to have such an ending. 3 months later, submarine crews throughout the Pacific Fleet were learning manual navigation techniques that hadn't been taught since the 1960s. And every time they struggled with paper charts and magnetic compasses, their instructors would tell them about the day Captain Lex Morgan saved 134 lives, using nothing but her instincts and the ancient art of dead reckoning navigation. But that's another story for another day. What happened next will leave you speechless. 6 weeks after the Yellow Sea incident, Captain Lex Morgan was summoned to the Pentagon for what she assumed would be a routine debriefing. Walking through the corridors of power in her dress blues, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. General Catherine Randolph, the 49-year-old Joint Chiefs cyber warfare specialist, was waiting in Conference Room 2A, along with Admiral Northcott and several other high-ranking officials she didn't recognize. Captain Morgan, please sit down, General Randolph said, her tone unusually formal. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Lex felt her pulse quicken. Yes, ma'am. The cyber attack on your submarine wasn't an isolated incident, the general continued. In the past month, we've detected similar intrusion attempts on 17 different naval vessels across 3 fleet commands. Admiral Northcott leaned forward. Captain, the techniques the North Koreans use to penetrate your systems have been identified in attacks on our installations in Guam, Norfolk, and Pearl Harbor. Here's the part that will shock you completely. Ma'am, are you saying this was a coordinated campaign? Lex asked. More than that, General Randolph replied. Our cyber intelligence indicates that North Korean hackers have developed a systematic method for disabling our most advanced naval systems. The attack on your submarine was a field test for a much larger operation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Lex realized that the USS Leviathan hadn't just been a random target, they'd been chosen specifically to test the effectiveness of this new cyber weapon. Captain, Admiral Northcott said, your manual navigation success has revealed something critical. When our digital systems fail, we're completely vulnerable unless our crews have analog backup skills. A new voice entered the conversation, which is why we're here. Lex turned to see a man in civilian clothes who hadn't been introduced. He appeared to be in his 50s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Captain Morgan, I'm Deputy Director Harrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency. What happened to your submarine represents a new kind of warfare, one where our most advanced weapons become our greatest vulnerabilities. But you haven't heard the most incredible part yet. Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do? Lex inquired. Deputy Director Harrison opened a classified folder. The President has authorized Operation Analog Shield, a complete overhaul of naval training protocols to include manual backup procedures for all critical systems. General Randolph added, every submarine commander, surface ship captain, and naval aviator will be required to demonstrate proficiency in pre-digital operational methods. Captain Morgan, Admiral Northcott said, you're being assigned as the program's chief instructor. You'll have carte blanche to develop training protocols based on your experience in the Yellow Sea. Lex felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. How many personnel are we talking about, sir? Approximately 12,000 active-duty naval officers across all commands, Harrison replied, plus reserve components and allied naval forces through NATO cooperation agreements. The revelation that changes everything. There's something else, Captain, General Randolph said, her voice taking on an even more serious tone. Our intelligence indicates that the North Koreans aren't working alone. She slid a photograph across the table. This is Colonel Kim Hyok-jin, the officer who commanded the cyber attack on your vessel. 3 days ago, he defected to South Korea. Lex studied the photograph of the man who had nearly caused an international incident. Why did he defect? Because he discovered something that terrified him, Harrison replied. The North Koreans were planning to sell their submarine cyber warfare capabilities to other hostile nations. Colonel Kim realized that his technology could be used to cripple American naval forces worldwide. Admiral Northcott leaned back in his chair. Captain, Colonel Kim has requested to meet with you personally. He claims he has information that could prevent future attacks on American submarines. You won't believe what Colonel Kim revealed. 2 days later, Lex found herself in a secure facility in Seoul, South Korea, sitting across a metal table from the man who had nearly destroyed her submarine. Colonel Kim Hyok-jin looked smaller in person than she had expected, but his eyes held the intensity of someone who had seen too much. Captain Morgan, he said in heavily accented English, I must apologize for what happened to your crew. Colonel, I'm not here for an apology, Lex replied. I'm here for information. Kim nodded gravely. The cyber weapon used against your submarine, it was designed not just to disable, but to capture. If your manual navigation had failed, if you had drifted into our territorial waters, the plan was to board your vessel and steal your nuclear submarine technology. Lex felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying this was an attempt to capture the USS Leviathan? More than that, Kim replied. It was a prototype operation. If successful, similar attacks were planned against your entire Pacific Fleet. Here's what nobody in Washington knew. Colonel, how many other nations have access to this technology? Lex asked. Kim's expression darkened. Before I defected, plans were already underway to transfer the cyber weapon to Iranian naval forces. They intended to use it against your carriers in the Persian Gulf. The implications were staggering. If hostile nations could disable American naval vessels at will, it would fundamentally shift the balance of maritime power worldwide. Captain, there is something else, Kim continued. The attack on your submarine revealed a weakness in our plan that we had not anticipated. What kind of weakness? Your manual navigation. Our cyber weapon was designed to create helplessness, to make your advanced vessels completely dependent on our assistance. But you proved that skilled sailors could operate without computers. Kim leaned forward. This is why I defected. I realized that true naval strength does not come from technology alone, but from the skill and courage of the people who operate the ships. The moment that changed naval warfare forever. 3 months later, Captain Lex Morgan stood before an audience of 200 submarine commanders from 12 different nations at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. The first international symposium on analog naval operations was about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, 6 months ago, the USS Leviathan was attacked by the most sophisticated cyber weapon ever deployed against a naval vessel. Every computer system aboard my submarine was rendered useless in a matter of seconds. The audience listened intently as she continued. But we survived, and we escaped because we remembered something that the digital age had made us forget. Sailors have been navigating the world's oceans for thousands of years without computers. Admiral Northcott, watching from the front row, nodded approvingly as Lex outlined the new training protocols. Every officer in this room will learn manual navigation, analog communication methods, and backup procedures for critical systems, she announced, because in the next conflict, your enemy's first move will be to blind your computers. When that happens, your crew's analog skills will be the difference between mission success and catastrophe. But the most important lesson was yet to come. During the lunch break, Lex was approached by Captain Lee Min-jae, the South Korean destroyer captain who had been present during the joint exercises in Busan. "Captain Morgan," he said, "I wanted to thank you personally." "For what, Captain Lee?" "For showing us that naval traditions still matter. After your incident in the Yellow Sea, the Republic of Korea Navy has completely revised our training protocols. We're teaching manual navigation to every officer candidate." Similar conversations occurred throughout the day. British, Australian, Canadian, and Japanese naval officers all reported that their respective navies were implementing analog backup training based on the USS Leviathan incident, the transformation nobody expected. 1 year later, the results of Operation Analog Shield were undeniable. Naval exercises that had once relied entirely on digital systems now included mandatory analog components. Submarine crews that had struggled with paper charts and magnetic compasses were now proficient in manual navigation. Most importantly, 3 separate cyber attacks on American naval vessels had been successfully countered using the analog backup procedures that Lex had helped develop. But perhaps the most significant change was in the naval education system itself. The Naval Academy had reinstated courses in celestial navigation and manual seamanship that had been discontinued decades earlier. Captain Lex Morgan, now promoted to the newly created position of Director of Naval Analog Operations, oversaw training programs that were being studied and replicated by Allied navies worldwide, the legacy that will endure forever. As Lex stood on the deck of the USS Leviathan during a routine training exercise 2 years after the Yellow Sea incident, she watched her crew practice manual ballast control and paper chart navigation with the same precision they had once reserved for digital systems. Lieutenant Crenshaw, now a lieutenant commander and one of the Navy's top instructors in manual navigation, approached with a training report. "Captain, the new class of submarine officers just completed their analog navigation certification," she reported. 100% pass rate, and their manual plotting accuracy is better than our GPS systems in some conditions. Lex smiled, remembering the terrified young officer who had once declared she couldn't navigate without computers. "What changed your perspective, Jennifer?" "Honestly, ma'am, that day in the Yellow Sea taught me that technology is a tool, not a crutch. The real strength of the Navy isn't in our computers, it's in our people." The final revelation that ties everything together. As the USS Leviathan prepared to submerge for another training dive, Lex received a message that made her pause. It was from Colonel Kim Hyok-jin, now working as a technical consultant for South Korean naval intelligence. "Captain Morgan," the message read, "I have learned that your analog training programs have been so successful that several hostile nations have abandoned plans for cyber attacks against American naval forces. They concluded that sailors who can operate without computers are too dangerous to engage." Lex showed the message to Commander Ashford, who had become her executive officer for the analog training program. "Captain," he said, grinning, "I think we just won a war without firing a shot." As the submarine descended beneath the surface, Lex reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A cyber attack intended to cripple American naval power had instead made it stronger. An attempt to exploit technological dependence had instead rekindled ancient maritime skills. And, most importantly, 134 lives had been saved not by the most advanced technology in the world, but by the oldest navigational methods known to sailors. The USS Leviathan continued its dive into the depths, guided by instruments that would have been familiar to submariners from 1943 and operated by a crew that had learned to trust their skills more than their screens. In an age of digital warfare, Captain Lex Morgan had proven that the human element remains the most powerful weapon of all.